welcome back to my channel. If you've never been here before, my name's Tori. And this is the bag we're making today. It is the latest bag by Billy 50. And the reason I've done the embroidery is to show you that it's really, really good for panels. So this embroidery design is by Urban Threads. I have made my own piping. This was the glitter vinyl that I had on my website. And then I've used some rainbow tape and chunky zippers, and that's about it. We've got bag feet. I've also done my logo, so I'll show you guys how I line that up. So if you'd like to see how to make this bag, stay tuned. I'm going to start with the handles today, just because I can. So I'm just putting some double-sided tape down the center. Now, I get a lot of questions about what brand of double-sided tape I'm using. And the official answer is the cheapest version I can find. So this particular one is from the Reject Shop. But I went to buy some more today, actually, and they had sold out. So obviously people have clued on to my little stash around here. You can also get it from supermarkets, craft stores. It's not any kind of special tape. From sewing shops like Spotlight, you can get something called quilter's tape, which is easier to sew through and doesn't leave the sticky residue, but I don't really have issues with residue with this machine. But if you find that your needle's gumming up a lot, you might want to switch to quilter's tape, and that will most likely help with your problems. Alright, so I've just folded both sides into the center. Now, I am using a piece of a glitter vinyl that I got for my website. I haven't actually got any more of that because Spotlight now stocks it. So I usually can't compete with Spotlight, so I just don't bother. So I've just done a couple of stitches and back stitch, and now I'm stitching 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the glitter vinyl. I'm just lining it up with my fingers as I go. Now, if I wanted to, I could have also put another line of double-sided tape down and stuck it to the center, but I find that this way is just as effective. Needle down, foot up, pivot. One more, needle down, pivot. And then I just have to fold off the end and back stitch. Trim off those tails. And then I'm just going to cut off that excess little bit of vinyl. That was probably my poor measuring skills. So now we've got glitter down the center on this pale baby pink vinyl. I'm going to do the same to the second one. You might think I'm rushing a little bit, and that is kind of true. Hubby and my child have gone out for a little while, and the embroidery design took well longer than anticipated. It told me 78 minutes, but it definitely took longer than that. I had a couple of breakages. I had to change a bobbin. But it still looked fabulous, so it's worth it. So I'm just folding. Basically what I'm doing is I'm pinching this to the center and then pushing down so that it sticks, like so. Alright, next one. Grab an end I like. This one looks nicer, so that's why I'm starting with this one. So we're going to go forward and back stitch and lock those stitches in. And then head down the long edge. So you can just hold it by hand in the center. As you can tell, I can only do small bits at a time doing it this way. And I just run out of bobbin thread. I did semi-anticipate that. I do have some more made up here. I've actually got two made up, because I'm going to put the piping in, I anticipate it's going to give me some grief. And I usually have to stitch my piping with 2 layers rather than just 1. So one is to kind of tack it in place, and then the second layer I do is to get really, really close. Now I'm just going to trim these tails so that I don't get them caught up in the other side of stitching. And then back stitch at the end, and then trim your tails. And then trim off my excess again. So there's another handle or strap done. Okay, so now we're going to do the gusset. So I've used the pale pink here as well. It's just the creamy white that's the front and the back. So I'm going to use... I was going to use pink tape, but I actually think that rainbow tape is going to be more fun. I'm a little bit obsessed with rainbow tape this week. And then I'm going to leave this piece in my tub of to-do. So these are all the smaller pieces. I always put it in my Lord of the Rings tub, just because I find it easier. So then we're going to take our lining pieces, which are here somewhere. Hold that thought. Actually, you know what? While I'm here, let's do the pieces I can see, because then we can start minimizing the amount of pieces I've got. So this is the slip pocket. I've just done the lining on both. If I had have done a fabric outside, I would have done one of these in fabric and then one in the lining to make it look prettier, but it was pretty vinyl, so there was no need. So there's that. Oops, dropping everything. I'm very unorganized for this. I apologize. So now I'm going to fold the pocket in half, like so. And we're going to need a ruler and a pen. So I'm just going to grab a normal pen, and I'm going to measure. Actually, she's got the measurements for this on the pattern piece. So you don't have to measure it like I am. So before I top stitch this, I am going to iron it. But we'll get to that in a second. So I'm going to take one of my inside lining main panels, and I'm going to put the half that I didn't draw on up the top, like so. And then line it up in the center, and I'm going to stitch around the box that I drew. Needle down. Get to here, backstitch. All right. So now we're going to take some scissors. Where are all my good scissors? We're going to fold this over, and we're going to cut, make a little snip. Now, I don't know if these scissors are going to work. These are my blunt ones. My good ones are over for where I was cutting. We're just going to cut down the center. And then when you get about ½ an inch from the edge, we're going to triangle out the corners. So cut along and then triangle out the corners. So you want to try and get with this triangle as close as you can to the stitching without actually cutting the stitching, so that you get these fun little triangles. So I'm going to turn this through, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to iron this flat, and I'm going to take that other piece, which is the slip pocket, and I'm going to put it wrong sides together and iron this flat as well. Now all lovely and ironed, so that's nice and flat there, and this has been ironed, so I'm going to just top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the top, like so. Now if you want to, you can tack down all around the sides if you're finding that they won't sit still, but I'm about to do that to the actual pattern piece, so I won't do it now. So I'm going to grab my one that hasn't got the zipper pocket on it, and I'm just going to line it up along the bottom. Now, if you want to, you can clip this in place so that it's not going to move. And then I'm going to find the middle. This is how I find the middle. And I'm going to stitch and back stitch, and I'm going to do that twice because that part there is going to have quite a lot of pressure, and I'm just going to stitch down. Now, you don't have to do it in the center. You could do it 2/3, 1/3. You could do 2 pockets, whatever makes you happy. So now that I'm here, I'm now going to tack this piece 1/8 of an inch from the edge, because I'm going to find that this is the easiest way for me. And then up the side and back stitch. And then we're going to come to this side and do the same. So we're going to stitch, back stitch, down, pivot, and back stitch when we get back to the center. So that piece is now on, and we can treat it as a single piece. Don't forget to trim off your little back part. And I've just noticed here, I missed this corner. So I'm just going to re-tack that down. No, I didn't back stitch. Yes, I probably should have, but it's more like a basting. It's not a permanent stitch. Trim off all of those tails, and that is now that pocket piece done. So I'm going to move on to the zipper pocket. So you grab your zipper tape, and we grab one of our zipper pulls, and I'm just going to split the zip about 2.5 inches. You don't want to split it the whole way. It actually makes it more difficult, in my opinion. And then when looking down the front of it like this, in there you can actually see the zipper teeth. So you want to line them up so they're even, and then you should just be able to pull the zipper pull on like so. So I always like my zipper pull to close to the left, so I'm going to lay that down. Take my main panel and lay it over the top of the zipper like so. And then we're going to stitch around the edge. Needle down and pivot. Needle down, and we're going to zip this open so that the zipper tee or the zipper pull is out of the way of my stitching. Needle down, pivot. Needle down, pivot. I'm going to get to here, and then I'm going to just zip it up so it's out of the way and finish off my rectangle. Now, I always like to start and finish in a corner, but some people do actually start and finish in a center. There's no right or wrong answer, whatever you are comfortable with. It's your bag, do it how you want. So now I'm just going to pick this up, and this should fold over and meet perfectly. So I'm going to stitch down both sides. And I'm going to leave the bottom of the bag open, and that's where I'm going to turn it through at the very end, or at least close it. And then we're going to do the same with the other side. So make sure the bottom's lined up, because we already measured and it should be perfect. Back stitch, up, back stitch. And so now that is your zipper pocket done. I'm going to zip it open so I don't have to forget later. All right, so now we're going to go on to the gusset pieces, because I've eliminated a bunch. So you've got your two mains. So again, I've used the soft pink for here, and then my lining pieces. And I should have a big piece of zipper I just cut off here. So I will be putting 2 zipper pulls on this. That is my personal preference because of the shape. I find that I think 2 will be nicer than 1. But you do not have to do that if you don't want to. You can just do 1. Grab Scully. So we're going to put the lining piece right sides up, and then the zipper right sides up. And then if you're a beginner, you're going to want to come and clip these 2 together. Like so. Then I take my third piece, which is my outside piece, and I'm going to flip it to right sides down to create my zipper sandwich. Again, probably not called that, but I've got nothing better. So we're just going to grab all these clips like so, and it should all match up if you've cut it all correctly. And then I'm just going to have this side of the foot run against the edge of the zipper, and I'm on a normal joining stitch. So for me, that's about 2.5, which I'm pretty sure stands for millimeters, by the way. And back stitch. And then we're gonna just, I've run off the edge, but instead of cutting the thread, I'm just gonna pivot it round, go up to my top stitch length, which is today 3 3/4. And I'm just going to fold the gusset over this piece here, back stitch, in case it wants to come undone ever, and then stitch along. And then back stitch. So then we just need to fold this piece down out of the way. So I'm just going to finger press it down and then grab my other binding piece. So we're going to go binding right sides up, zipper right sides up, clip. Now again, you don't have to clip. I find I like to clip on the second round. I usually don't clip on the first, but this is an educational video. And then we're going to take this piece. Now these aren't directional, so it doesn't matter which piece I put down next. If it was a directional print, you want to think about, do you want them both going the same way, or both facing inwards with the print, or both facing outwards with the print? Again, personal preference, but it is something to think about. I'm going to go back to a joining stitch length, and then I'm going to back stitch. Now back stitching only needs to be a couple of stitches. You don't need to do 2 inches of back stitching. It's not actually any more beneficial than the few that I do. Just takes longer, uses more thread. So again, we're going to pivot it around and just fold over this top bit, and then we're going to stitch 1/8 of an inch from the seam where the zipper joins, in this case, the vinyl. Now I'm not adding a shoulder strap to this, but you definitely could if you love shoulder straps. I haven't cut one because I ran out of the light pink. Otherwise I probably would have done one. So now I'm going to take my last 2 zippers and I'm going to put them on each end. Now if you're struggling with this piece, or you think you're going to struggle in the future, go ahead and iron it from the lining side. Obviously don't iron directly onto your vinyl. You will melt it and wreck it, and that would suck. And I have done it before. I thought I was trying to be sneaky and iron really, really close to the vinyl. It's not really a thing. That's why I got a mini iron. Makes it easier. Alright, so that's one end on. Then I'm going to crack this end as well. And then after I've put them on, I'm going to put the 2 zips together to make sure that everything lines up. What you don't want is a big lump coming out of one side. So as you can see, these are even, but if I had one bigger lump on this side, I would have to take it off and adjust accordingly. One of these days, I'm going to do a video on how to fix all of these problems. I promise. It's just a matter of time lately. Okay, so we've now got this. I've got my zippers in the middle. I don't want them too close to any of the edges so that they don't get in my way. So I'm going to start with the lining, because lining is always easy to maneuver. And I'm going to line up the short end of the triangle type shape. And this will be the only time I do the clips, but I'm just going to show you. So you've got these 2 flaps. We're going to stitch this one up to the zipper and then this one up to the zipper, using the seam allowance and a normal stitch length. You want a joining stitch length for this, and you want to back stitch at both ends. So this method does create a lot more tails you have to cut, but it means you don't have to do binding. I could make this same bag with binding, which would potentially look really cool, and I might do that in the future. I haven't had a lot of chance to do videos because everyone's on holiday. Pull that out, trim it off, flip it over, do the same to this side. Backstitch, always backstitch, it locks your stitches in. I'm sure you're sick of me saying it. So this is what we should have, and you should be able to put your finger through where the zip is for now. We are going to fix that. So now we're going to take our side pieces. So I've only put foam on this because it's vinyl. If I had have done a fabric printed fabric bag, I would use my hefty interfacing and vinyl. But in my head, this is going to be an awesome bag. So this is what I was inspired to do. And I've decided I really do need to use my embroidery machine more. It costs me a lot of money. It needs more love. Alright, so then we're going to bring over this piece. We're going to stitch and we're going to back stitch. So I'm making sure that everything else is out of the way. So all of my lining pieces, I'm going to trim off those tails. And then I'm going to flatten both of these out and stitch across here. But before I do that, I just want to say, if you were going to put a shoulder strap on, you'd grab a piece of vinyl and put your D-ring on and then slide it into here before you stitch this shut. So if you're adding a shoulder strap, this is where you add the D-ring to here. As you can see, we're not doing that today, but this bag will still be glorious without it. And you can still use a shoulder strap with this bag even without the D-rings, because you can connect it to like opposite square rings. It would still work. So we're going to stitch here. We're going to go up to but not over the zipper, and making sure we back stitch. And then pulling all of the lining pieces out of the way, we are again going to stitch up to but not over the zipper. And then flatten these out and stitch across all of them. I did actually think about using the pink waterproof canvas for this bag, but I thought it was a bit too bright for my print. So that is now your gusset piece done. So this is what it should look like, and you may also have the D-rings here if that's what you chose to do. So that's that piece done. Next up, our strap, or our D-ring strap connected things. I'm not really sure what I'm calling them today. Actually, so the quick way to do this is you butt them up one against each other, and then just sticky tape them all together like this. So it's like a big long caterpillar, and then I can just come and trim in between. Now I don't do this when I've taken the backing off, because sometimes the double-sided tape sticks to your scissors and then it gets tricky and messy, and no thank you. So I like to cut it and then peel off the backings individually. You're welcome to try it the other way. I just have not had a great deal of success, so I will stick to my individual ones. So then we're going to fold each side into the center. Now I'm going to add a top stitch to this to make it pretty on the outside. So 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Now rather than cutting it off, I'm just going to stitch along that edge because you won't see it anyway. You could have also done in the center, but these won't have any raw edges, so we're not going to see them. But it's just quicker to stitch across that short edge at the bottom than it is to cut it off and create more tails. You'll most likely waste less thread doing it this way. And like I said, you won't see the stitches, so it's not like anything's going to look uneven. You can actually just leave them all connected and chop them off at the end if you really want to. Do like a proper chain stitching. So what I'm doing now is called chain stitching, where I don't cut off the old piece before I start on the next one. It's a good way to save thread and time. So now that I've done all of them, I can trim them off now. You waste no thread doing it that way. Okay. So let's start with the lining pieces. We always do the lining pieces first because the lining is easier to manipulate when we're putting on the outside as opposed to the other way around. So I'm just finding the center at the top and the bottom. The bottom one is obviously for later because we're going to need that. I know where my center is there. Should probably do the top. So the center for me was where I stitched the pocket on, which is why I didn't need to do that bit for that. And then we just want to find the center of this as well. So I'm going to go from seam allowance to seam, or seam to seam, not seam allowance. And then just trim off a little triangle. We're also going to do the outside now as well. So we're going to do the vinyl and the lining, because that's going to be much quicker to do it now than later. So again, snip there. And I usually don't use these to snip because I have a bad habit of cutting myself. Not deliberately, it's just my fingers apparently get in the way. So here's the center and here's the center. So we're going to put right sides together and we're going to add a clip. And then we're going to come out to the side. So I'm going to do 3 clips along the top like this. And then I'm going to come down to the bottom and match this bottom edge up. Now, if you've done all of your seam allowances correctly, this should all just match up nicely. If you're finding that something is either too big or too small, the ways to fix that are, if you've done your seam allowances too big, rather than unpulling them and making them less, you could just chop off like 1/4 inch from the bottom of the bag, but you would have to do that to all 4 pieces to make it work. If you haven't done big enough seam allowances, you just go back to the step before with the side pieces and just make the seam allowances a little bit bigger. Everything can be fixed. Now I'm trying to make sure that I make my clips face the gusset direction, because I'm going to sew it together with gusset side up, and it's always easier to have it that way. I find that things don't move as much as well. Put your clips on the right way, things don't move about, and these clips will then be easier to pull off because of the direction of the gusset, or the clips on the gusset. Okay, joining stitch length, off we go. All of those back into Scully. Mess is your enemy when you're sewing. Okay. So that is now one side in. I'm going to trim off that tail that we left at the start, and now I'm going to do the other side of the lining. So again, you want to make sure your zipper pocket's open. It's going to make this a lot easier. Add a clip. So I'm going to add 3 clips at the top before I switch to the bottom. and work my way up, because that will ensure that everything matches. So I use a lot less clips on my lining than I will for the outside. I'll use almost double these amount of clips for when I'm doing the outside, because I'm fighting against the foam and the vinyl and just everything. Now with these bits here as well, you always want to point the seam allowance towards the bottom of the bag. It just helps the bag to sit nicer. That is what I have found. You're welcome to try and do it the other way, but just make sure you do it the same throughout the whole bag. So all 4 bits, you want to point them in the same direction. Okay, other side, off we go. So we're going to back stitch at the start, like we always do. I'm going to make sure that that seam allowance there is pointing down. I'm going to come around the bend, pack up my clips that are in my way, continue on. So I'm just folding the vinyl out of my way as I stitch, and I always try and stop with my needle in the down position. I find it easier. It kind of helps to hold everything in the place that I want it. Whoops. Ha! Caught that one. So there we go. So now if you unzip this at the top, we have the beginnings of a bag. So now I'm going to take my lining base piece and I'm going to find the center on both sides, and then I'm going to line up the side where the zipper pocket is the side I'm going to want to stitch shut. Where's my center? I swear I just did this. I did, there it is. Right, so I'm going to line up the center with the center here, and I'm just going to stitch the straight edge. So I just put 1 clip on it there to kind of hold it in place. I'm going to pop it under the needle and only do this straight edge. And the reason we only do the straight edge is because now I've given the entire base of the bag is the space to turn the bag through. And I promise that is going to make it much, much easier. Okay, our outside pieces. So the first thing we need to know is we need some piping. Now I haven't actually measured out how much I need, but I'm going to give it a rough estimate here. Give it a little bit extra for good measure. And then just chop that bit off because I don't need it. I won't throw that out. It might be useful for something later, but for now, not so much. So what I want to do is change my foot over to my zipper foot. Now my zipper foot has got some Teflon tape on the bottom of it because it's not a Teflon foot. Now while I won't necessarily be going over vinyl, I do find that the Teflon helps the foot glide over the bag foam a lot easier. And yes, I am using a bobbin as my screwdriver. Somebody taught it to me once. It is super handy. Okay. So now I'm going to get my giant roll. So this is size 1 piping cord by Birch. I like thin piping. Different people like different stuff, and there is no right or wrong answer. I personally like the thin stuff though. I'm also going to need 2 of these, so I'm just going to measure this and repeat. And again, use that bit maybe later for something else. So, to make piping cord, all I'm going to do, this I have cut 1 1/4 inches wide for my size 1 piping. You will need to cut different thicknesses depending on how thick the cord that you use is. I know some people love nice thick piping. It, I think for me, ultimately depends on the type of bag I'm doing. But whatever. So I'm stitching this together, but I'm not stitching too close to the actual piping cord. Another way to do this would be to double-sided tape it together. You could do that. I'm not, but you could. So I'm just lining up the edges. I don't want to get too close to the edge, too close to the cord, for mainly one main reason. I don't want to see this stitching poke through the piping later. So rather than cutting this off, I'm just going to take my second piece and just go again. And literally just folding it in half and stitching it on. Now this takes practice. I used to really suck at piping cord. I'm not even lying. I was terrible at it. But like anything, you have to practice to get better. Don't be scared of piping cord. It also helps that this is quite a flexible vinyl. If you've never done piping cords before, you have a couple of options. You can buy pre-made piping cord, or I might suggest that you start with like quilting cotton as your first piping cord. Because quilting cotton is quite flexible and I don't cut it on the bias. I didn't cut this on the bias as well. But if I was using a poplin, for example, it's a lot more of a rigid kind of weave. So I would cut piping cord made out of poplin on the bias. So the bias means a 45-degree angle, basically. Alright, so I'm going to back stitch just because I don't want it to come undone, and it's one of my habits I have. And then I'm going to cut the cord, and so I'm done with that. And then I'm going to come and cut this piece in half, because I'm also done with that. And then we need to measure where our strap connectors are going to go. So I'm going to fold it in half. I'm just going to add a clip for now. I'm using my thin square rings. I couldn't think what they were called then. I have two size square rings on my website. I've got thick chunky ones and I've got thin ones. And they both have their place, just depending on what kind of a look you're going for. I thought the thin was more appropriate because I want the focus to be on my crazy stitch out. So I don't need chunky hardware kind of pulling focus. So I want to measure there. And then I'm actually going to use 2 clips to put this here. Like so. And then I'm going to do the same to the other side. Like this. And that's where my handles are going to be. Now, obviously, you can spread them further or closer than the pattern suggests. It is only a suggestion. I did think about putting, like, a fun quote on the back of this bag. But nothing that I looked up for carousels was very positive. It all sounded a little bit dark and negative, which is why I didn't end up putting one. I wanted like something whimsical and fun, and they were all just about life spinning around in circles, and that did not inspire me, so we didn't do one. But this bag is a really good size for panels. So if you've been saving up a panel because you really want to use it in an amazing bag, I would most likely suggest this one. Off the top of my head, this is what I would put a panel on, which is why I did embroidery. Embroidery is the equivalent to me of a panel. So, now we're going to take our piping cord, cut off that tail so it's not in my way, and I'm just going to line it up along the edge, and I'm going to stitch basically 1 stitch closer to the piping cord than I already did. Now, as you get to the curve, if you find it's not behaving on the curve, you can actually add some clips. So you can take your little clippers and add some, basically some notches. Now, I want this, by the way, to go under my, what are these called? Strap connectors. So I actually want this to go under. So that they will now be between the gusset. And that way the piping will look uninterrupted the whole way around. But I felt the need to place these first so that I could see where they needed to be. So you want to go nice and slowly there. That's quite thick. It's got a lot of vinyl going on. So we're just continuing around the bend. And I know I've got a little bit extra, and I just ran out of bobbin thread again. Right as I took off. That's always the way. But this is why I wound 2 full ones, as well as that little extra bit I had left over. Because piping always takes more thread. Now you can buy special piping feet that will hold the piping right where you need it. I don't like them, to be totally honest. I have a few different sizes. I'm not a huge fan. I think I just prefer to do it old school and actually do it. But it is an option for you. So now we're going to do the other one. So I'm just going to lift this up and pull it out just a little bit. And then set this down on the edge and off I go again. And then when I get to a point where I think this first one's going to fall off the table, I can trim it off. Put it aside. I don't need it just yet. Go around the corners. Lift this up, shove it underneath. My phone keeps lighting up. I keep thinking it's people calling me, but it's my lovely people buying my pattern. I'm so glad you guys liked the Vixen. For those that aren't aware of me and my stuff, I do occasionally write some patterns. I have a life goal this year to write 12 in total, but I don't know how successful I will actually be. We will see. I have to be inspired. I'm not going to force it. And I like my patterns to teach something new each time. Since I make these to teach you guys stuff. Right. So I've basically just stitched either right on top of or right next to the stitching I already had when I joined it. Now there is still quite a gap. I'm going to show you. There is still quite a gap between where I stitched and the actual piping. So there's probably like a full 1/4 inch. But that's just going to give me room to make sure that you're not going to see any of my stitches when I join the bag together. Because that's what I care about the most. I don't want to see it. So, we're going to match center notch with center notch of bag. And then we're going to start using a lot of clips. And that one's already the wrong way. So I want my clips to face the gusset. It's going to be the easiest way to do this. Now, I am looking here. This is going to be quite thick here. Because of my strap connectors, I did use vinyl. So my suggestion is, if you're on a home machine and you want to add all this piping and all kind of fun stuff, I would maybe make either your piping and or your strap connectors out of fabric so that you don't have issues. Because issues is obviously not what we want. Now, as you can see, I'm using a lot more clips than I did for my lining because I want to make sure that everything's going to stay exactly where I want and hold everything in place. Whoops. This wasn't actually going to be today's video. I was going to do a hack on my own new pattern. But this is just as good because it's going to look amazing. Now, see this? See how it's not technically matching? I'm not worried. Because what I've done is I've obviously pulled something just a little bit too tight somewhere. So what I need to do now is just maneuver that excess into the rest of the bag. In 2 seconds, you're not even going to be able to see where I had that problem. See? It's gone. I no longer have that big ripple. So that's why we do front out and then bottom up, to make sure that we don't end up with something out of place or stretched or whatever. So, joining stitch length. Now, in a perfect world, I will get this first go, but I'm not holding my breath because I never do. So what I want to do is I'm going to use this hand, and normally I would have fake fingernails, which makes this much easier, but my fingers got sore and they needed a break. So I want to feel with my fingers where the piping cord is, and I'm just going to try and sew right up against it without sewing over it. You don't want to sew over it. We can always get closer, but once you sew over it, we have to unpick, and then it's going to leave holes in the vinyl. So it doesn't matter if it takes 3 passes to get close enough. Just try really hard not to stitch over it. That is important. Sometimes it takes me 3 passes. It's taken me 3 passes in videos. So long as you don't sew over it, everything can be fixed. Now it's going to be a little bit more tricky when you get to the strap connector parts. So you just kind of have to wing it a little bit there. But again, it's better to have a gap than to stitch it all the way into the seam. Also, keep an eye on your bobbin thread for this. I would hate for you to put all this effort in and then you get to the end and realize you run out like 2 inches in. I always try and stop with the needle down as well, and I'm just pulling all of this out of the way and then just feeling my way up next to the piping. Now I'm going to show you how close I did or did not get. I think I did all right, but we're going to have a look. So, actually, you know what? That worked out wonderful. Look at that. Ah, I love it. See how it gives it a nice finish. I'm a fan. Anyway, so that's what the front of the bag is going to look like. We're going to turn this back over. We're going to do the same to the other side. Line up the center. I also should probably hurry. I'm expecting my husband home soon. I'd like to finish this before he gets home. So I'm just going to put 5 clips at the top and then come down to the bottom, line the bottom up. Now my zipper foot is what I found best for this. But feel free, you can buy piping foot kits where it holds different size piping foot in different thingos. Don't be discouraged just because I said I don't like them. You might find them absolutely amazing to your process. So don't shy away from just because I personally don't love them. But do think about how much piping you want to do before you go and invest in them. I have a few and they live in the drawer. Realistically, I only use 3 feet. My zipper foot, my invisible zipper foot, because it makes invisible zippers amazingly easy, and then that Teflon one that's like that greeny yellow color. Sometimes I pull out the other ones, but not very often. I just don't. I can do everything I need with those 3 feet. So if you're on a budget, get those 3 feet, you'll be fine. It's not to say that others aren't helpful, though. I'm not trying to discourage you from buying. Not trying to encourage you either, though. Your husbands will hate me. or wives, or both. Alright, so again, I'm feeling with my fingers where the piping is. You always want to try and stop with your needle in the down position. Don't throw all your clips away. That's silly. Whoop. You want to have really good foot control, or slow your machine down if you have that option. Alright, so here's a thick bit, so you deliberately go slow over the thick parts. Going fast over thick bits is definitely 100% how you break a needle, every time. Now again, I'm going to push this bag over out of the way. I think we're doing alright so far. Alright, I'm going to trim off these tails because they're annoying me and they're everywhere. Now you just want to look inside the bag and see how your piping went. Now, this one didn't go as well, so I'm going to turn it through just to show you. You may not be able to see it, but right here, see how it's not sitting right in the seam? It means I haven't stitched close enough. So funnily enough, it's only on that straight bit that seems to look like it's got a problem. And it's not a huge problem. I could leave it, but I won't. Because now I know it's there, it's going to bug me. So I just didn't get close enough between the 2 points of the strap connectors. So I'm going to start the other side of the strap connector. And I'm just going to come in like 1 stitch closer. You don't want to overdo it, remember? Okay, I feel better about that. Now that I've done that, I've finished with this foot. I'm going to go back to my normal one. Do it up. Okay. So, another little fun thing. Here's the outside, here's the lining of the same side. What you want to do is you want to bend this over, and I'm just going to tack it along this top bit. I'm going to back stitch, stitch for about 2 inches, and back stitch. And what this is going to do is it's going to hold the bag up. Alright, so we take the outside piece, and here where they're joined, you just want to fold them in and just line up all of the center top points. Now, I'm not going over the strap connectors. It's too thick. We don't need to break a needle. You just need to do like a couple of inches. And when you turn the bag through, that's going to hold the roof up where you need it. I know it doesn't look like much at the moment, but just bear with me. Now, this is my base. I haven't put my logo on it. I need to put my logo on it. I forgot. But first I'm going to find the center of here and here. And I'll show you how I rule up to put my logo in, because I know a lot of people are curious. I actually had a lady message me privately and ask, could you use this method for your own bags? I say 100% yes. Everything I teach or everything I do to hopefully inspire you. So if you like the way I do something, you're welcome to do it too. Alright, so that's where my logo will go, but while I'm here, I really need my other ruler. I like to measure in my feet. I always put my feet pretty much in the same spot. It's just a habit I've got going on. So there, there, Alright, so that is how I mark my feet and my center. So I'm going to turn off the camera, go and put my logo in the center, and then we'll add bag feet and finish off the back. So my logo has now been stitched on. I kind of like it with the foam. It gives it like a nice little padded look. Anyway, this is my hole punch. It is a 2mm hole punch. I know a lot of people have been messaging me asking me. I got a 2mm hole punch. You can get other sizes. You can get bigger and smaller. So I'm just going to punch all 4 holes and pop that over there. And then I'm going to push the post through the back and then clip or click on the foot. So they will stay there until I'm ready to squish them, but they won't stay there forever. So make sure that you do squish them. You hear them click, which is nice. And then I'm just going to pop it under. So I always put the domed foot to the top because technically this isn't big enough for it. And you don't want to squish this down as hard as humanly possible. You just want to squish it until you feel it click again. So this is not like how hard can I push, because you will just damage the foot. Either way, they are now my feet on. So we're going to take the bag and then I'm going to put my base, whoops, readjust my chair. So I'm going to add my base in. So as always, I'm going to, which way am I stitching this? No, okay, so I want my clips to face the bottom piece. So I'm just going to use lots of clips because otherwise it's going to try and fight me. I know what this thing's like. Now, if I was doing this on the cylinder arm machine, I would stitch this the other way. So I'd add all my clips in the opposite way. It just depends on your machine's capabilities. So now that we've got this corner, all I want to do is line up in the center, making sure my clips are facing the right way. And the main reason that you want your clips to face the way you're sewing is because they are much, much easier to pull off. And in my opinion, they're holding it better when you're actually sewing. Right, so that's one end, or 3 sides. We're just going to do the last side now. So you want to line it up in the center. If you can't eyeball the center, please mark it with either a pen or some clips or something. Alright, so foot down, I'm on a joining stitch length. I'm going to have this up. Now, we are stitching a 3D object, so I am going to treat it as such while I'm stitching. So I just pull off a random clip. I'm going to stitch and back stitch, as always. I'm going to pull this down so you guys can see what's going on. So I'm just going to stitch and pull the clips off as I'm going. And then as I get to this corner, I'm going to start lifting it up. So it's going to go around the corner nicely. Now, you don't forget you are jumping over the piping. Like so. So I was kind of pulling it, but not really. Pull the clips off, bring it round, and then back stitch. Trim off your tails, and then I'm going to come in with some scissors. Now these are my Class A knife edge. Basically these are my heavy duty ones that like cutting vinyl. So I'm going to trim down all of this excess that I don't want hanging around. Especially in the corners. You don't need all that extra bulk hanging around disrupting things. Okay. So now that the bottom's on, we're going to turn the bag through the whole bottom. As you can see, that was pretty easy. We're not trying to feed it through a small hole, is the main reason why that was so easy. Push out all your corners like so. And then we're just going to turn all of this in. Now, I don't know if you can really tell on camera, but see how this is not sagging at all inside the bag. So when you push everything, that top still stays up really, really nicely. And that's because of the way I tacked it before we turned it. All right, anyway, we're gonna go in through the zipper pocket and we're gonna pull all of the lining back through. I'm just gonna readjust that. There we go. So I'm pulling all that lining back through here, but not the whole bag. Please don't be mistaken. We don't need the whole bag back through. I just need to be able to stitch the bottom of the lining shut. So I'm going to start at a point where we left off. Now, if you're new to sewing, you will most likely want to clip this. But I've played this game enough to know what I'm doing. So, my suggestion would be, if you're going to clip it, you do exactly the same as what I did for the outer base. There's no difference except it's the lining. And I'm also twisting this bag around as I go to make sure that it's all going to go for me. And then back stitch. And then, again, we're going to take those scissors and especially at the corners, we're going to trim off all the excess fabric. The reason we're trimming this down is it's going to help the lining sit neater inside the bag. That's why we do it. Without all of this to interfere, the lining should sit really nicely. If you're finding that your lining is sitting a bit dodgy still, take another 1/8 of an inch in. So stitch an 1/8 of an inch inside of your previous lines and then trim the old line and then try again. I know some people that stitch the lining like 1/2 an inch smaller than the outside to make sure it sits smoothly. All right. So now that that's done, again, you might want to test it and make sure it's all sitting nice. And then we're just going to take this pocket and I'm going to tuck in those raw edges. And again, if you're new to sewing, grab some clips along like this. You could also iron that to make it nice and crisp. And then we're just going to chuck it under the needle and you're going to stitch like 1/8 of an inch from the edge. I don't normally put those clips on, but I just thought it might help as a visual aid. And then tuck the pocket in, zip it up, and then I always stand up over the bag and push the lining in. Now, after I go off camera, I will turn on my mini iron, and I'm going to iron the lining to the back of my double-sided bag foam so that both sides will be ironed to it and it will sit flush forever. But I'm obviously not doing that right now because right now I'm going to add on my cool straps. So again, I want a pen and I want a ruler and I'm going to rule 1/2 an inch up from that edge. And then because these are the thin metal square rings, I'm only going to measure 1 inch up. If I was using chunkies, I would do 1 1/4. So it's all just, whoops, relevant to what hardware you're using as to what measurements you need to do. My pen's not exactly working right now. Awesome for me. Sometimes you can just dint it enough. Try blue. Oh, there we go. Blue's working for sure. You're not going to see these marks. It doesn't matter what color they're in. Just don't make them the whole way along the strap. That would be silly. But where these are, I'm just going to punch the hole out. Measure and mark. And then I'm bringing these bad boys back again. Normally I actually just leave them on the bench where they sit, except for videos. Then I'm going to punch all the holes and then move this one aside. Okay, so that's all the holes we need. So now I'm going to take my bag and I'm going to go up and under and then put my post through both of them. Snap the cap on. Now I'm snapping the cap on the front. If I had decorative things, I would put the decorative part on the front, which is always that bit. Now I probably could have done these a little further apart. But when I was doing this bag, I didn't actually have the measurements, so I guessed. Not gonna lie, totally guessed. Still looks fine. It's still gonna hold everything fine. I have zero regrets about where I put them actually. So I'm just putting the bag under and squishing them. I'm doing them one at a time. So to do my straps, I smooth them out and then I bring them round, up and under. So that way when you're carrying the bag, you don't see these raw edges. If on the other hand, I had those fancy strap ends, I would do them the other way so that you would see the hardware. It's all just relative on what you're doing and how you're using it. But that is now one completed bag. I hope that was helpful to you guys, and I hope you try out some piping. I will attempt to do another video tomorrow that has more piping, just to really shove it in your face, I guess. Anyway, till next time, guys. Bye-bye.